actually, we realized the 10th annual anniversary of this award that is given by the libraries by way of our Sustainability Fund, which is a very unusual thing in academic libraries. I've been around a while, and it's a really amazing resource that allows us to honor you all for the really incredible work that you did. And it was a very competitive year, so congratulations again to all of you. Your hard work was very appreciated by the reviewers, which were the science librarians, Anne Graham, Flynn. Yep. Paulina was there for the ride with us. Yeah. I was there. Rebecca Resnick-Zellen. We have new people. We have
Melanie Raddick.
Melanie Raddick.
Jess LaJoy.
And also Sierra.
Sierra.
Right.
I don't have her last name.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of new people. That's how new they are. So there are a lot of eyes on these papers. So what we're going to do tonight is have each of the winners come forth, and you have 5 minutes. I'll time you. And just, tell us your story. You'll have one slide up, and thank you for sending those. And then we'll also give you some certificates at the end of your presentation. And then we want to have a discussion, because we thought, wow, we have you all in one place, all these great thinking, feeling people. I'm going to tell you the quick story of our campus carbon mitigation plan, which many of you know that we have an ambitious goal to be carbon neutral by 2032. And so we want to kind of hear some of your thoughts. Very low pressure, very casual, just like spin these chairs into a circle. I have a 1-question prompt, and we'll just have a freestyle discussion. And we want to capture your ideas, because I'll tell you more why we really value what our students are thinking and planning and imagining for the campus and the world, as all of your papers foretell. And we want to bring this conversation today and weave it into a bigger conversation. So that's just like a little teaser for later. But without further ado, and please, library friends, tell me if I'm missing some important piece of information. I want to invite Theodore Eagle. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And also, we're going to videotape just the presentations. We won't videotape the discussion later. Let me get your slide. And there it is.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for this honor. This is really exciting. Really happy to be here. Thank you to everyone who read these papers. Thank you to the other recipients of the award. It's a real honor to be here with you. So yeah, I'm here for this paper I wrote called TOTO. We're not in Hadley anymore. The environmental, economic, and cultural complexities surrounding the adoption of no-till farming on large-scale farms. It's a wordy title, but I work on a very small no-till farm in Hadley. It's called the Starte Farm. And do people know what no-till means? Raise of hands. Yeah. So just to recap, we don't use a plow. We don't till the soil whatsoever. We're not turning over that topsoil that would then release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. We're building up that organic matter, and we're maintaining that really vibrant soil health that's crucial to a sustainable food system. So that's me there with my coworker Sadie. We're seeding, I think probably some kind of cover crop into one of the beds at the Starte. And then on the left is a picture of Justin Knopp's tractor. He's a farmer in Kansas, farming on thousands of acres, also doing no-till. And so to begin with the kind of environmental impact of no-till on a small versus large scale, the work that we do at Astarte is really exciting, and although it's quite labor intensive. And our goal is to sequester carbon and also regenerate the soil to the point where future generations of farmers can have access to this really fertile soil. Justin in Kansas, he's also doing the same thing, but on a huge scale, sequestering tons of carbon. And this can't happen everywhere. No-till farming is really dependent on the region. You can't for instance, do no-till farming in really rocky soil, because what you're doing is you're planting directly into the soil without aerating it. And in order to do it on such a large scale, you have to spray a lot of chemicals. And so there's this trade-off. You sequester far more carbon than we do at the start site, but then you have to apply a certain amount of chemicals that may be harmful to the environment. On the economic side of things, I've looked into the kind of economic incentives that there are in place for especially large-scale farmers who are practicing no-till. There are carbon taxes, there are incentive programs, there are really innovative programs that are being put together for farmers to put their fields into no-till agriculture. And so, this is quite the learning curve. A lot of traditional family farmers are unwilling to adopt these sustainable growing practices. It's quite a foreign process of not cultivating the land, not tilling the soil between every crop goes against a lot of the values that family farmers have held for generations. But in order to inspire more farmers, who farm on a large scale to employ these practices, I'm excited to now, having studied both ends of the spectrum, as it were, become somewhat of a cultural broker in understanding how both systems work, and so we can try to achieve even more sustainable middle ground, a no-till middle ground.
You have one more minute.
One
Do you
more
want to
minute.
add anything else? It's okay if you don't.
Yeah, I want to plug a Start Safe Farm since I'm up here. We are in Hadley, and we have a CSA program. We're still accepting CSA members, so we of course have all no-till, no spray produce, and yeah, we're still accepting members. So if anyone's interested, I can send out that information. We also accept volunteers. So if you want to come learn more about what it's like to work no-till, and get your hands in the soil, let me know, because we would love to have you on the farm.
Thank you. That's great. So here is Shaki Begum.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me be here and giving me this opportunity. I'm Shaki. I am a BDIC, medical anthropology and health policy analytics major. I'm talking about fast fashion and sustainability, and the reason I'm doing that is because nowadays a lot of people buy so much clothes than we used to buy in the previous years, and it has been a loophole of taking resources from different countries and making those into clothes, cheap clothes, and then putting it into waste. And so this waste is creating a whole carbon emission in the world. I think fast fashion makes about 10% of carbon emission that the greenhouse emits, and it's destroying a lot of the produces, as well as creating a lot of health issues in children. They're becoming disabled by all these petrochemical that's been released by fast fashion companies. And a lot of these women who are working in fast fashion companies, they also are subjected to a lot of different kinds of violence, sexual assault, as well as not having enough pay. And fast fashion companies, they're able to have companies overseas because they are able to get through those regulations, and governments aren't really, trying to see how they regulate different conditions, working conditions that leads to government collapsing. Government collapsing, and one of the government collapse that happened in 2013 was the Rana Plaza factory, and because of that collapse, a lot of people died. About 1,134 people died, and because I'm from Bangladesh and it really hit home for me, I started looking at how all these companies are able to go with these injustices not have anybody account them to any kind of responsibilities that they're creating in this role. And so the reason I'm up here is because I'm trying to see how people are trying to create their capsule, just their wardrobe based on their lifestyle, but what does it mean for you guys to have clothes? How does it define you guys? For say for example, like, does clothes define the person that you guys are, or is it because you are putting those meanings to it? So I want to go towards a direction where people are thinking about all these different clothings and how they are impacting all these different cycles, like the marine ecosystem as well, because a lot of these clothing have synthetics in them, and when we wash all these clothes and the water goes into the ecosystem, it's destroying a lot of the marine lives as well. That's why I have this picture, because like it encompasses everything about fast fashion, and how, like Instagram, Facebook, other social media platforms, they are always promoting us to buy more and more clothing and to look like celebrities and successful people, but that doesn't really define who we are. But we tend to like just go and buy more and more because of these marketing gimmicks. And I think that we have to look at how we are living our lives based on what we're doing, our clothing, the way we consume things, and reusing materials. And this dress I made out of my mom's curtain because she was throwing it away. So I was like, all right, like I want to use that as something that I want to create, like a capsule wardrobe, because I really want to become intentional with the way I am living my life and the sustainable practices that I'm doing. And that goes on to say like how there's a quote by Anne Mary Brown that she says, "What are you watering your plants?" That's it.
Oh my goodness, fascinating. Thank you, everybody. I wish we could do some Q&A. I feel like we're gonna have time for that. So hold your questions. I have already so many for both of you. And also I'm forgetting to give the certificates. Could you be the certificate person? I'm not able to somehow coordinate all of that. Okay, let's continue on. Our next award winner is Adam Fink.
Hi everybody, I'm Adam Fink. Before I get started, I would really appreciate if we could all take a deep breath. I've been running around all day, so if we could just take a deep breath through our nose, just breathe out through our mouth. Maybe one more breath in, out. Thank you. So I like to talk, and I'm probably going to talk a lot. So Madeline, I see with your timer. Can you give me one of these or something when I have 1 minute? Thank you. So hi, I'm Adam Fink. I'm a senior. I study in the BIC program for regenerative food systems, and then I just threw in sustainable food and farming to be redundant. And I'm here today to talk about my community food action plan. I had an assignment for my community food systems class to study just something in the food system that's going awry, which is a very broad topic with a lot there, and I focused on farm worker exploitation. We were reading about how agricultural workers in the United States are just some of the most exploited workers of all people. Most people in the capitalist system are exploited to some degree, as we saw in the last one, which people are treated as profit-driven objects, or the land is taken as a resource that can just be plowed and extracted, and the same mindset that fuels that fuel treatment for exploitation. So in the United States, we had slavery, and it was literal objects, people treated as objects to work the land, which is also treated as an object, and that mindset continued on and on and on. So farm workers face some of the worst conditions of any people in the world. They are exposed to dangerous chemicals. They're paid poverty wages. In the United States, most workers are people of color, and a large percentage of those workers are migrants that don't have any path to citizenship, so they can just be abused and they have no recourse because their bosses can just be like, if you complain, you're deported. So they have no course of action to, seek accountability. And this exploitation is codified in the law. In 1933, when labor unions were starting to become more legalized, agricultural workers and domestic workers were explicitly left out for the direct purpose of not giving benefits to people of color, because most people in these fields were Hispanic, Black, people of color that they didn't want to give Social Security benefits to or give these rights to unionize. And then during World War II, there was the Bracero program, which basically all the fighting young men in the United States went overseas to fight in wars, so there's no people to work here. So they had a program where people from Mexico and El Salvador could come to the United States very temporarily on worker visas, but they had no path to citizenship. There was no protection of their conditions, so they were living in huts made of sheet metal. They were just awful conditions. And this continued on until, there's a long history of the movement, but my project had a case study of the United Farm Workers Union and how they saw these conditions, and they united in California. Delano, California, I believe, was this huge grape growing valley. So all of these wine farms were people in these chairs swilling their French wine as the farm workers were living in pigsties. So I kind of analyzed the tactics that these union leaders used. Cesar Chavez is a well-known leader, Dolores Huerta, and Larry Itliong. And it started in the early 60s. It gained more traction. They became an official union recognized by I'm forgetting the long acronym of the official union leader board, and they became a fully recognized union. They were inspired by many of the civil rights movements leaders going on at the time, by Gandhi. It was nonviolent. A lot of worker strikes and worker boycotts usually turn violent. Historically. So I analyzed how they worked together. There was racial solidarity between the unions, because usually workers or owners will pit other races against each other, so they'll fight. But the Filipino and the Mexican workers united together. They had boycotts, and they also had consumer strikes. So it was not just the farmers, but they reached out to people in cities and being hey, don't buy these crops. They focused on grapes because that's a luxury. No one's subsisting off of grapes. And they used religious symbolism. They had a huge march, 300-mile march on Easter, and this whole theme of repentance. And I had this action plan that's not on here about how we can have a union now, because unions, we have the lowest rate of unionization since 1932, I believe. Now it's only 10% overall. So I'll say, hey, we unionize and we have social media and we have all these other internet resources. We should be connected and use our resources together. And that should be 5 minutes. Thank you.
I'm going to do something spontaneous that we did not plan for. But Adam, that breath, thank you for that. That was really well-timed. And I'm really feeling these topics. These are really critical and world-saving and world-making topics. And I just remembered that our campus has an official land acknowledgement that I wish I'd thought to share at the very beginning, but let's just do it now. And this was created just recently by our UMass Native American Advisory Council, and it is read in many settings now on our campus, including it was read at commencement for the first time this past June. So I want to say that the University of Massachusetts Amherst acknowledges that it was founded and built on the unceded homelands of the Pecumtuck Nation on the land of the Norwottuck community. We begin with gratitude for nearby waters and lands, including the Quinetiqua, the southern portion of what's now called the Connecticut River. We recognize these lands and waters as important relations with which we are all interconnected and depend on to sustain life and well-being. The Norwottuck community was one of many Pecumtuck Indian towns, including the tribal seat at Pecumtuck, which we now call Deerfield, about 20 minutes up the road, Agawam, which is in Springfield, about 40 minutes south of here, and Waranaco, which is Westfield, which is west of here. And that's just a few. The Pecumtuck, who had connections with these lands for millennia, are part of a vast expanse of Algonquian relations. Over 400 years of colonization, Pecumtuck peoples were displaced. Many joined their Algonquian relatives to the east, south, west, and north, extant communities of Wampanoag, including Akina, Herring Pond, and Mashpee, Massachusetts. The Nipmuc, with the reservation at Grafton, Passamaquoddy, the Narragansett in Kingstown, Rhode Island, Shagatoke, Mohegan, and Pequot peoples in Connecticut, the Abenaki and other nations of the Wabanaki Confederacy extending northward into Canada, and the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican of New York and Massachusetts, who were removed to Wisconsin in the 19th century. Over hundreds of years of removal, members of southern New England tribes would make the journey home to tend important places and renew their connections to their ancestral lands. Such care and connection to land and waters continues to present day, and we can see that and feel that in all of the work that you're doing. Today, indigenous nations in southern New England continue to employ diverse strategies to resist ongoing colonization, genocide, and erasure begun by the English, French, Dutch, Portuguese, and other European nations, and that continued when tribal homelands became part of the United States. We also acknowledge UMass Amherst as a land-grant university. As part of the Morrill Land Grant Act of 1862, tribal lands from 82 native nations west of the Mississippi were sold to provide the resources to found and build this university. This land acknowledgement is just the first step in the university's commitment to practice intellectual humility whilst working with tribal nations toward a better shared future on Turtle Island. We aim to foster understanding, deep respect, and honor for sovereign tribal nations, to develop relations of reciprocity, and to be inclusive of Native perspectives and thriving Native nations far into the future. And so this is work for all of us, and it's work for a lifelong of learning and reciprocity and care. So thank you for allowing me to pause and bring that into our space. And now I would like to invite Guinevere.
Hi, I'm Gwen, and I'm a senior studying environmental science and sustainable community development. The project I submitted for this award is a research paper that investigated the issue of accessibility to green spaces in urban areas, as well as how urban greening techniques can actually gentrify areas. And I wrote the paper this past semester for a course called Environmental Geography and Sustainability with Professor Rick Miller, who's a great professor. If you ever get to take a class with her, I recommend. I was interested in exploring how urban greening techniques have excluded people of color and low-income groups from ecological services, and as I said, gentrified those neighborhoods in the U.S. And throughout my research process, I collected resources from the UMass Library online database, as well as the internet and sources that my professor provided for me. I basically first looked at how greening techniques such as rooftop gardens, revitalization of parks, and alternative transportation methods can be inaccessible to people of color and low-income families. So I really grouped together a lot of greening techniques, not just specifically like grass and trees and stuff like that. And then I looked at how when you improperly integrate these projects into marginalized areas, it can gentrify them. And lastly, I concluded with some recommendations that I'll touch on at the end. So one of my main findings in my research was that historically zoning laws have promoted the location of high-density working class housing in close proximity to factories where parks projects are least likely to be funded. So for example, in Los Angeles, the high-density neighborhoods, which are made up of primarily Latino and African American families, have less than 2 parks per acre per 1,000 people, whereas the lower density, primarily white neighborhoods have over 30. And additionally, in a study of cities that was conducted by the Trust for Public Land, it was found, you can see it's kind of hard to read in that infographic, that parks within a 10-minute walking distance of majority non-white neighborhoods are half as large as the ones within the same walking distance as majority white neighborhoods, and that this demographic, it cuts down to, I think, a quarter for low-income neighborhoods compared to white-income neighborhoods for the high-income neighborhoods for the same walking distance. And on top of that, parks that are in marginalized neighborhoods are typically smaller and more dangerous than ones in white affluent neighborhoods are in terms of pollution, crime levels, and traffic accidents. So combined with the issues of how expensive it is to own an automobile and how inefficient our public transportation systems are, this is really an issue it's really inaccessible for people to get to high quality green spaces. And lastly, I looked at how some projects that are aimed at providing ecological services directly to marginalized neighborhoods can fail if they're either implemented at very high scales or if they aren't involving the local communities. Because if they're implemented at high scales, they'll attract new demographics, which will bump up the prices of the rents in those areas by like up to 50%. And there was one one bicycle improvement plan that was supposed to happen in Portland, Oregon that failed to gain support from the African American residents because they had a really bad history of redlining in the area, and there were basically no people of color included in the planning process, so they were worried that they weren't really taking that issue seriously and that the bicycle improvement plan was not going to be accessible to them. And then just to finish up, my recommendations included incentivizing affordable housing developments to mitigate the increasing rents, using zoning as a tool to promote greening projects that are small but effective. I forget who it is, but there's a planner who uses the term just green enough, which basically means that they're getting parks and things like that that aren't completely changing the demographics of the area. And the last recommendation was just to include as many people as possible in the planning process because getting more ideas is always better. And that's all I have.
And our last presenter for the evening is Gregory Holker McKee.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg. I'm a junior studying sustainable community development and economics, and I wrote this paper, Cooked Nature, What 3 Classic Books in the American Law Can Tell Us About Our Current Struggle to Mitigate Climate Change, which is a mouthful, and I wrote that for a class taught by Professor Theodore Eisenman in the Landscape Architecture Department called Urban Greening, so it's tangentially related, at least your presentation, although this focuses more on suburbs. So I've always been fascinated by lawns and the fact that they're so ubiquitous in America, yet their purpose is somewhat unclear. And once you may think, oh, well, these are there for children to play on, they're places of recreation, and yet when you think about how much fertilizer and pesticides are dumped on them every year, then it becomes clear that this is not necessarily their true purpose. And looking into these 3 books, as well as a lot of other sources, it turns out the lawn was originally invented in the Reconstruction period after the Civil War. And it came about largely as a result of desire by the white Southerners to delineate themselves in their landscapes from newly freed slaves. So there's a racial fear, and that drove them to create these landscapes that pretty much had no purpose. They were not for grazing animals, they were not for gardening, they were places to show a superior form of wealth. And then this pretty much went away with the Depression era when everyone had to microfarm their property, more or less, out of necessity. But with the development of the suburbs, as you can see here, this is Levittown on the cover of that book. They became even more prevalent throughout America as the segregated suburbs rolled out east to west. The lawns came with them, and at this point, this is when the industries of the fertilizer industry as well as the pesticide industry were able to capitalize on this landscape by promoting an idea of monoculture and as well as the idea that the lawn should be green all year round in order to market as many products as possible upon the consumer. And they did so in a way of associating a perfect lawn with a loyal American. Because at this point, the Cold War was beginning to pick up. So, in order to promote this, this total conformity in terms of landscape, then they were able to basically associate any weeds with a lack of patriotism, and they did so quite well because it still exists today despite our lack of any. Well, I guess now we're going back into somewhat of Cold War era, but for the last 30 years, that has basically existed in the past, but through tradition, the lawn has remained. And we can see here, in this very brief summation, that the lawn tends to respond to the fears of suburban Americans. So it is ripe and fertile ground for sequestering carbon if it were allowed to be a meadow, if we're allowed to be biodiverse, and perhaps we can harness the current fear of climate change and to actually create a practical response in terms of promoting a better landscape aesthetic for America and the suburbs. Thank you.
Thank you to all our presenters. And that is not easy to do, to condense all of that thinking and writing and research into 5 minutes. So that effort is really, really appreciated. This is what I sometimes hear called lightning talks. And yes, thank you, Anne.
There were
so-
certificates for the honorable mention.
Yes, and before we wrap up this portion of the evening, we also had 2 honorable mentions, and they were both group projects. So I want to hand, Anne will give a certificate to one of the team members. So there were 3 people that wrote a paper together, or a project called Anaerobic Membrane Bioreactors as a Treatment for Wastewater and Biogas Production at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So Brady Bell is going to accept this for the group. Yay! Thank you for coming and receiving that along with Marley Norton and Ariel Fine. And I would love to see that built here on our campus. We need that. And the next group was a team, also 4 people, that wrote Undergraduates Raising Awareness for, this is the one, sorry, anaerobic digestion. You're the biodigester people. Very good. So we have with us Kieran Tay and Nicholas Spalby, and is Michael here too? And Michael Forazis, and Flo Sabatini wasn't able to join, so if you would accept, so I guess we'll hold Flo's certificate.
Sure,
Yeah, and then the other 3, please enjoy your certificate. And wow. There's just so much energy in the room with all the people here and your loved ones that were able to come and join us. Thank you for really making change, for interrupting harm and building a healthier and more fair place for all of us to live. And I mean all of our kin, not just the human beings, but all the beings. And so I really honestly want to thank you for dedicating your time and energy that way. You could have chose many other ways to spend your time, but you really sat yourself in a chair for many hours and did the hard work and the thinking and the refining and got the support you needed from faculty and librarians. And it's really acknowledged here today, and I'm sure going forward. So keep telling your story. And I want to take a little break, maybe, as we reform ourselves.